these properties assemble. Right? Properties assemble in order to make a thing. So a thing is that around which the properties have assembled. Properties assemble around, the properties assemble and their assemblage creates the thing. So a thing is that around which the properties have assembled. The Greeks are supposed to have called to it to hypokamion. Forgive me if my pronunciation is bad, it's been a while since I've done ancient Greek. But to hypokamion. For them, this core of a thing, the core, right? So now we're at the core, and actually I want to use a different color. Right? Around which things assemble. So the properties are assembled around a thing. The core of the thing now is what we're discussing. For them, this core of the thing was something lying at the ground of the thing. You can see how dense and difficult. This is partly the reason why it took me 2 hours to read one page. But for them, this core of the thing was something lying at the ground of the thing. Something always already there. Right? Something always already there. So that the core of the thing is always, I'll return to this in a second because it will be important. Always, right? Always already. This core of the thing is always already. In philosophical terms, you can describe this as the given, right? The concept of the given has been co-opted quite a bit by analytic philosophers, but there is a sense of shared similarity, and also I don't really buy into the whole continental analytic divide per se. I think we're both doing continental philosophers and analytic philosophers. I consider myself both. We're both doing exactly the same thing, just from different assumptions. But the idea is that the core of the thing is itself always already given. I have to stop there, and we have to make sense of this. Like, what in the hell, seriously, does this mean? Especially if you're an artist watching this and you're not familiar with philosophy. It's crazy to think that your introduction to philosophy, if this is the first video lecture that you're watching, is via Heidegger, right? It's a very, very dense conception. But think of this, right? We want to understand what a thing is. Why do we want to understand what a thing is again? Because art is a thing. And we want to understand what the thingly element in art is. What is it about art that makes art different from a sack of potatoes, as he said before? Or what is it about art that makes art different from a bag of coal, right? There's something in art that makes art different from other sort of inanimate, ordinary, mundane, trivial, mere, he says, mere things is his technical phrase. What makes art different from mere things is the question. Part of the recognition of how to conceptualize an answer for Heidegger as to what makes art different from mere things, which is a very technical question, that could be a dissertation thesis for all practical purposes. The response to that is to recognize what things are. Things, according to Heidegger, are a consequence of the assemblage of properties. Properties assemble themselves around the core of a thing. Just understand it. You might not necessarily, or just sort of just swallow it, memorize it, commit it to memory. You don't necessarily have to understand it right now, right? Don't complicate it. So that properties assemble themselves, and insofar as they assemble themselves, their assemblage creates a thing, okay? Well, insofar as their assemblage creates a thing, there has to be a core to this thing. The thing that allows the properties themselves, and I'll give you a good example in a second. The thing that allows the properties to assemble themselves around. That possibility, this core of a thing is always already. And the only addition I would add to Heidegger to make it a little more clear, because it was extremely difficult for me to make, it's hard enough to try and read this and understand this. Compound it by tenfold to try to present it so that you can understand it as well. This core of a thing is always already. The only addition that I would say, Heidegger doesn't say this, but I would say it just so that it's accessible to you now, is that it's always already possible. Very, 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 very important. It's always already possible. It's a possibility in the world. There is no contradiction inherently in the existence of this thing. So, just to make sense of this latter point, then to give you an example, it is not possible, right? It's not possible, it's not conceivable for us to have an object that is one in the same moment, in the same occupied space and time, to be both 6 feet tall and simultaneously, same space, same time, not 6 feet tall. It could have been 6 feet tall and it's not 6 feet tall, sure, but it cannot one in the same object at one in the same moment in time and space both be 6 feet tall and not 6 feet tall. The core of that thing, whatever that thing is, for those of you who know Heidegger, you know what this is, but I'm not going to lecture on it now. The core of that thing is not possible. There isn't a possibility that that thing, the thing that is both 6 feet tall and not 6 feet tall at one in the same moment in space and time, the core of that thing is not possible. So, since the core of that thing is not possible, the conditions cannot be satisfied. The antecedent conditions cannot be, being the core of the thing, cannot be satisfied in order for properties to then assemble themselves around it. There is no way in which you could consolidate any arrangement of properties that would allow that thing to come into fruition. It's impossible, right? Impossible existence. Contradictory existence. Okay, if that's clear then, we can make, so always already super, super important. We'll come back to this. I think it's actually a genius insight. I'll give you a quick preview for those of you who watched my video lecture. No, it wasn't a lecture actually, it was just a commentary. My video response to the question of music, and I talked about music being a cocoon. The cocoon is the always already, right? It's always already conceptualized, right? The idea is always already conceptualized, provided the fact that it has no contradictory components to it. Let me give you an idea. This is not the greatest idea, but on the drive here today, I'm listening to Lil Wayne. To be honest, hey, shout out to Weezy. Weezy will never watch this, but shout out to, I shouldn't say that. Maybe he will. Who knows what Weezy watches? That's not cool. But shout out to Weezy for the Carter 4. I bumped the Carter 4 hard, heavy. It's up there. I think it's a classic personally. That has nothing to do with this lecture. But on the way to work, the Carter 4 is in the background in the truck, and I didn't bootleg it. I bought the copy, right? So I'm listening to Carter 4, and I'm thinking about how in the hell am I going to describe this? Right? How do you make sense of this? Right? How do you make sense of just the basic building blocks for things? And I started thinking about building blocks. I'm thinking about amino acids, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what? That's too hard. Let's keep it simple. Sandcastles. Now, sand is in abundance on the beach. Obviously, right? There's sand everywhere in the beach. This sand has the possibility of being arranged in many, many different ways. I have absolutely no artistic ability at all. So I can do the traditional scoop up a thing of sand with some in a cup, get a little damp, and you put the cup down, and then you got like a little, that's the extent of my sandcastle abilities. It's a wrap. And you know, if you have kids, you take your kid to the beach, you make sand castles. So if you look at the sand as the property of what? Sand is a property, obviously, of a sand castle. That's undeniable, right? So that sand is a property of a sand castle. Okay. The sand castle is the finished work as sand castle, an artistic sculpture, and you've seen these. I mean, I live in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and we have like world famous sandcastle competitions, and people get thousands of dollars for making sandcastles. The sandcastle as a finished product is a thing. So is the sand, but the sandcastle as a finished product, for simplicity's sake, is a thing. The properties of that thing are the individual grains of sand. As Heidegger says, the properties arrange themselves, assemble themselves around the core of the thing. Similarly, gross example, but you need this concept in order to understand, individual grains of sand are assembled by the artist, in the genius of the artist. Individual grains of sand are assembled in such an arrangement that they, the individual grains of sand, bring into fruition the always already possible existence of a particular